Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. We are looking into another mystery. You know, frequently I'll bump into cases here. Someone has been shot. And those are some of the hardest cases to cover because sometimes it happens out in a street and you have no idea in terms of suspects, what direction to even look in. Very little physical evidence might be left behind. Sometimes you don't even get a shell casing. Today's story is a little bit different because we do have a shooting, but it happens in someone's home. As a matter of fact, it happens between a husband and a wife. And it leaves us with that big question. It's originally called in and reported as an accident. Is there more to it? And if there is more to it, how do you prove that? Can some caring friends and social media actually help push that investigation forward? We've got a lot of different things to consider on today's case. When I started looking into this, I had no idea where it was going to land. And honestly, I don't know where you guys are going to land on this either. So let's start looking at it together. For this case, we're heading to the state of North Dakota. There it is. And in particular, we are talking about the city of Minot. Now, it is a city in and the county seat of Ward County, North Dakota, United States, according to Wikipedia. It's in the state's north central region. It's most widely known for the Air Force Base, located approximately 15 miles north of the city. It has a population of over 40,000 people as of the 2010 census. It's the fourth largest city in the state. It's also known as Magic City, commemorating its remarkable growth in size over a short time. With that consideration, I would bet that the population might have even increased. I mean, it's been a while since the 2010 census, but let's continue over at kxnet.com. May 22nd, 2020. The Minot Police Department is investigating a report of an accidental shooting that occurred around 8:40 p.m. Thursday at a Northwest Minot address. The initial report indicates a male subject accidentally discharged a firearm, striking a family member. Police say the female patient was transported to Trinity Hospital with serious injuries. Very serious injuries. And none of these articles are being exactly clear about where the injury was to. We're going to weave in some social information as we go through this. That's the best that we can do for trying to understand where this injury actually occurred in terms of the victim. May 25th, 2020, the victim in a reported accidental shooting Thursday night in Northwest Minot has died. Police have identified the victim as 37-year-old Connie Rod of Minot. The incident remains under investigation, as it should. I mean, of course, it's a death investigation, so right off the bat, despite the fact that it's being reported as an accidental shooting, that's probably what the conditions of the original 911 call were. It's good to know that the investigation, as of here, a couple days later, is still effectively open. There's been a lot of cases we've looked into where it seems like sometimes the initial assumptions just roll a little too quick on those investigations. But we're going to see what happens in this case. So this is Connie. This is one of the heartbreaking aspects of doing this work. We're learning about her through her obituary. Connie was born September 22nd, 1982 in Alexandria, Louisiana. She was raised and educated in Louisiana. She continued her studies at Park, Norwich, and Southern Methodist Universities, earning her master's degree in public administration and a master's in science of counseling. Connie devoted her life to helping others any way she could. This is seen in the most honorable of jobs that she held. She worked at New Horizons Center for Healing. She was a substance abuse counselor at Community Medical Services and Job Corps, and her current job was at the Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch at Burlington, where I believe she was doing addiction counseling. Obviously, someone that cared a lot about other people, wrapped her whole career around that. Always breaks my heart when we learn about losing people that have focus like this, just throw their lives into helping others. Connie enjoyed her hobbies of crocheting, camping, fishing, crabbing, hiking, biking, riding motorcycles, anything outdoors, spending time with family, especially on game night. She was a great friend and coworker, best friend, awesome mother, and an amazing wife. She was united in marriage to Eric Rod at Minot on February 27th, 2019. So obviously we're talking about them being married about a year and just a few months at this point. Connie is survived by her 4 daughters, Faith, Bridget, Erica, and Haley. I believe that the daughters are from previous relationship. So this is Connie's Facebook. We could see it's actually got a photo of her and her husband, just basically confirming the same information about where she studied. Chemical dependency counseling is something that she specialized in. Went to Alexandria Senior High School, and she is married to Eric Rod, as you can see in this photo. Now, I also found an article about Connie that's not related to this shooting that is fairly recent. This is from September 20th, 2019, and it's about her taking that position at the Dakota Boys and Girls Club. The Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch in Minot has hired a new addiction counselor. Quote, "I hope to kind of give those families hope. Give the kids hope that come from these families of addiction. Help them learn those coping skills, those recovery skills, so that they're not tempted to relapse," said Connie Rod. It just breaks my heart. So I'm going to start weaving in some of the social information. We get a man on Facebook named Evan Hunt. And Evan starts posting fairly soon. We can see this post from May 24th, 2020. "Connie, you are the most caring person I've ever met and gave your all to help others. We are going to miss you terribly. You and your family are in our thoughts." Now, from that post in late May to another post made July 15th, 2020, the tone has changed pretty dramatically. Evan is now posting, "I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, but I just want justice for Connie here in Minot. Hashtag justice for Connie." So obviously something has happened in terms of information with Evan. We're going to hear a little bit more about that through official media sources. But let's just go through this thread, a couple things that I noticed. Here he's responding to someone. "Well, I can tell you I've seen investigations go completely public and the news cover every step. I hope for some reason this is a thorough investigation and justice is served. Been a while though." So it seems like initially he's kind of concerned that the news coverage on this just came out with that initial information. This is an accident, some type of mishandling of a firearm. Connie was shot. Unfortunately, she passed away, and that's that. Lucas Johnson is also in this thread, says, "Just don't think the absence of public information equates to lack of interest from law enforcement. If it's this obvious to all of us, it has to be clear to them." So obviously there's other context and other conversation that's going on between these people that are much closer to the situation. As a matter of fact, some of them get into some details. Angie here says, "I'm one of their neighbors and a couple things just don't add up. And since day one that this happened, I see her husband every day and his actions show that he has no remorse. I guess I'm just confused on how a man who accidentally kills his wife can go on with life like nothing happened. I see him going on shopping sprees, sold her vehicle right away, going on vacations, just kind of weird to me." And we have a response to that by a woman named Heather. She says, "After my son passed, we did go shopping, and I did get rid of some of his things. Everyone grieves differently. In our case, we did what we could to get through." Honestly, with what I'm seeing in these threads, it's kind of the best aspects of us being able to connect with each other, us being able to open up with each other about our personal experiences and come to some better understanding. And I just really appreciate that, you know, Evan's being a little vocal. He's putting the word out there, but there's also a community that's kind of forming around this conversation and talking about different aspects of it and really trying to come to a better understanding. Heather's point, she's absolutely right. Everyone grieves differently. It could be that this is completely normal for him to be doing this kind of stuff with the grief process that he's going through. And it might look very strange to some other people from the outside, but there's something I can't get from this conversation thread, and that's what's the conversation that really shifted Evan's perspective? where is the aha moment for him? Now, I've actually reached out to him. We've been in contact already. He's working on answering some questions I've sent to him. I don't know if they're going to be back before I'm done recording this. But if they come back at any point today, I might just fire up the camera again and add it to the end of this episode. So know that he is being responsive. We are in contact, but I sent him a pretty good load of questions. So we'll see if we can get a better understanding of that. We are going to get a little bit of a better understanding as we continue through the news information, because he was interviewed by local news as well. But let's continue here. A little over a month after Evan's post and kind of the community discussion about what's going on in this case, we see that the investigation might have actually been continuing, or maybe that conversation helped nudge things in some way. Here at kxnet.com, husband arrested in Minot shooting death of Connie Rod, August 27th, 2020. After an investigation into a Minot shooting originally reported as accidental that killed 37-year-old Connie Rod, investigators say they no longer believe that that was the case. A warrant was issued for 42-year-old Eric Rod, Connie's husband, for murder. Let's go ahead and continue at Minot Daily News and get some more details about this. Minot Police reported Thursday evening that they arrested Eric Rod, 42, on a charge of murder, a Class AA felony. Rod's arrest followed an extensive investigation. Police said that their investigators discovered evidence that led them to believe that an accidental shooting had not occurred as initially reported by Eric Rod. Police submitted their investigative report to the Ward County State's Attorney's Office for review. The review resulted in an arrest warrant for Eric Rod on the murder charge. Pretty challenging to try to understand what's going on in this case. I mean, we had the shooting originally happen back in May. Obviously, friends get concerned over the following months. By August, we have an arrest already happening. And that's after it's been passed through the county state attorney's office. So obviously that took some time as well. It seems to me like, I don't know if the investigation ever had a true stopping point. We're going to hear some comments that'll give us a little more insight there. But I've also got this huge question about, is this right? Is this, how do you go from this is called in as an accident, something that happens within the four walls of a home? So in terms of witnesses, what other leads could you really develop around this? But we also have to keep in mind, Connie is a mother of 4, and I don't know the living conditions of those children. Are they living with their father? Was one or more of them possibly visiting or living with her at the time? Keep that in mind as we're rolling forward with all this. Evan posts about this, hashtag justice. We get several of this group, and it's not a giant group. It feels like maybe it's about a dozen people or so that are all still discussing this, and they're happy that there's an arrest in this case, and it does look like justice is coming. Several weeks after the arrest, we get a little more information coming out through kxnet.com, and finally they're interviewing Evan, so we might start getting some insight into what's happening around this, plus kind of their analysis on, is the community pressure responsible for nudging this investigation? It's been 3 months since a Minot woman died after what was initially reported as an accidental shooting, but pressure from community members led investigators to dig deeper, leading to an arrest for murder. Kind of plainly calling it out there. Do they give us a source for that? Are we hearing from law enforcement that that's what's happened here? Quote, Connie was so funny and she was so welcoming, so anyone that had any type of issues or whatever the case may be could talk to Connie, said Evan Hunt. And I definitely get that from all the information that we could find about her, both professionally and socially. It was unbelievable when we first heard about what happened. He believed there might be more to the story. We talked about it and the things that we noticed prior, and it kind of raised a lot of questions at first, that it was an accident and who did it. And it definitely made us raise our eyebrows on what actually happened, Hunt said. So once again, getting a very strong sense there's a discussion happening amongst friends of hers that's beginning to raise some issues and raise some questions. He says he and other friends noticed a change in her demeanor before her death. So he stuck to his instincts and posted weekly on social media, pleading for police to investigate further. And one other thing I want to call out, I think he's got just over 1,000 friends on Facebook. I don't know if he was posting in other places as well. If there's lessons that we could take away from this, it doesn't take a huge following, I think is one of those lessons. It takes people having meaningful conversation, conversation that you can tell is them actually searching for the truth. Plus that combined with them having personal insights, maybe some direct information to help investigators understand all this better. And it feels like that right combination is what happened with Evan specifically. Chief John Klug says investigators had found enough evidence to lead them to believe that Connie's husband intentionally shot her. I keep going over this in my head. How can we get to that conclusion? I don't know. And I'm not saying that I think it's incorrect. I want to understand this better. It's such a tough crime scene. It's in a home. Sounds like it's a single shot. From the social information, the weapon isn't named in any of the official sources. In some of the social information I'm seeing, it's saying we're talking about a rifle, and we're talking about a shot to the face. So the kind of unofficial story is supposedly they were packing up for a camping trip. We heard in her obituary, it's one of the things she loved to do. She loved camping. He was handling a new weapon, a weapon that he was somewhat unfamiliar with. Somehow the gun goes off and she has been struck. I believe now combining the social information in the face, I believe it's a .22 caliber rifle based on the social information. I just want to be very, very clear that's not official. So we have to kind of leave a little bit of a question mark on those particular aspects. Back to the comments from Klug. I think the fact that others had a belief that it wasn't an accident, sometimes it's that outsider influence, like they might know something else about the situation inside that household, added Klug. So we're kind of hearing it direct from there that it certainly did influence them. I don't know that pressure is the right word. I think just having that line of communication, and I'm trying to understand that a little better as well. That's one of the things that I've asked Evan about, because I don't understand. You know, it's one thing to go on Facebook and to say, hey, there's something wrong with this case, and I really believe that my friend was murdered. How do you get that to the attention of people like a police chief, and then, you know, really have it resonate with them so that they act on it? I'm kind of hoping we can get answers to that, because I really would like to be able to share that information with other families that I talk to that are facing similar situations like this, where, you know, they feel like there is indeed a crime, something that's been reported as an accident isn't exactly what it seems. And it seems like in this case, we kind of had that right mix of getting this to happen, and in a really pretty concise time frame. So up to this point, from the media perspective, we've got a really loose story. I just got to be upfront about it. That is kind of hard to understand. We've got the chief saying, yeah, no, this was an investigation. It was influenced by these friends that raised their concerns, kind of just gave us a little more insight into maybe there was something wrong that was going on in the home, but they've found something that seems to have convinced them that this was indeed a murder and not an accident. But I'm still struggling to come to an understanding of what that could be, what that is. And I'm still wondering, do we have a guy that's potentially innocent that's sitting in jail and now facing these charges? One of the good things is, as these court processes begin, we start getting some more insight. He hires an attorney. At one point, that attorney directly engages the media. We're going to get to that information as well. But we start getting some info that rolls out earlier this month, essentially. Over here at Minot Daily News from January 14th. A murder trial for Eric Stephen Rod, 42, is likely to be scheduled for 2 weeks in August. Rod made an appearance at a pretrial conference before North Central District Court Judge Gary Lee. Rod's attorney, Patrick Waters, told the judge on Wednesday that the shooting was an accident. He went into more than that, saying it wasn't premeditated, it wasn't done in cold blood, and he was basically presenting an argument asking for the bond to be reduced. Rod is being held on a $250,000 bond at the Ward County Jail. Waters had asked the judge to lower the bond to either $100,000 cash or 10% of $250,000 with GPS monitoring. But Judge Lee said that he believes the current bond set is already on the low end. And I have to say, after looking into as many cases as we have here, I kind of agree with him. Yeah, the 250 is not that steep of a bond, particularly when you're talking about charges like this. Lee also said at Wednesday's hearing that he will not allow Rod to leave the state if he's released on bond. Yeah, why would you agree to that? But his lawyer brought up kind of an interesting aspect that might have to do with our Facebook friends again. Waters had asked that Rod be permitted to live in Iowa with his parents if he was released on bond, or as an alternative, that he be allowed to live in either Cass or Burleigh counties. Waters said feelings in the community are running high, and certain people have made veiled threats against Eric Rod on Facebook. I can tell you for the information that I've personally reviewed, and I'm not saying that I've read every single post, do I see that there is anger towards him? Yes. Was there initially frustration that there wasn't an arrest made sooner? Yeah, a little bit of that. I don't think I've seen anything that I would consider threats, even veiled threats, at least for the stuff that I've looked through. However, Waters said Eric Rod is a military veteran with no prior criminal record, has lived in Minot for 10 years, and is presumed innocent. And of course, I want to absolutely support that. Even as of the time of recording this, he's still presumed innocent. But we also got two kind of important facts there. Military veteran and no prior criminal record. It's weird because those facts are kind of sitting at opposite ends in my mind. On one side, military veteran, now I'm thinking he's probably at least somewhat, if not extremely experienced in handling weapons. What's the likelihood of this accident situation? Oh, it's a new gun. I don't know what's going on with it. I didn't recognize that it was loaded. It somehow gets pointed at my wife's head and then goes off. Kind of tough to believe already. Just kind of on the outset. But then when we add that condition that, wait, this is a veteran on top of that, I don't know. That gets really tough to believe. But then on the flip side of that, we've got no prior criminal record at all. So this guy went from being a veteran, serving his country, to murdering his wife, and we've got no steps in between there, no type of escalation patterns, previous people that he was with that talked about potentially abusive situations or tried to file restraining orders or anything. None of that. Just all of a sudden from military to criminal. Not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's a very weird juxtaposition. Thinking about the accident situation, realizing he's probably experienced with weapons, that's really tough. On top of that, no prior criminal record at all for something that looks like a dispute between a husband and wife. If we do think that it's a criminal act, I don't know. Waters also objected to victim impact statements that were filed with the court by friends, co-workers, and some family members of Connie Rod in opposition to lowering the bond for Eric Rod. And he asked the judge not to read those victim impact statements. Judge Lee said that point was moot because he had already refused to lower the bond, so he didn't have to read the victim impact statements. I'm pretty sure we know who sent in at least one of those victim impact statements and might have been responsible for rustling up another few. Here at Washington Times, you get just a little bit of insight and kind of an important point. So Eric Rod was arrested in August. He was charged with felony murder and felony reckless endangerment in his wife's death. Now, that's an important consideration. I just wanted to understand the reckless endangerment angle a little bit easier because I think In the accidental situation, particularly if he's experienced with weapons, like we can now somewhat assume that he is, even if it was still an accident, could that have still been reckless endangerment? Him knowing about weapons like that, handling a weapon he wasn't familiar with, having it loaded, having it go off. So here at definitions.uslegal.com, reckless endangerment is a crime consisting of acts that create a substantial risk of serious physical injury to another person. That's interesting because in an accident situation, I don't know that it's necessarily, would it be considered a crime? Anyway, the accused person isn't required to intend the resulting or potential harm. So that would certainly cover an accident, but must have acted in a way that showed a disregard for the foreseeable consequences of the actions. So for that charge, even in the accidental situation, there would have to be some story that they heard about how he was handling the weapon or something he had done with the weapon for them to bring that specific type of charge. And if we continue into the articles here, we might get some better insight into what exactly that was. But over at inforum.com, the murder charge Rod faces alleges he willfully caused the death of another human being, quote, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. This is sounding weirder and weirder. Like, what is the story about what he was doing with the weapon? There has to be something very strange about it. Like, was he joking that he was going to shoot someone while he was pointing it at them and then it went off? Something along those lines. Because the conditions that we're hearing in these charges, really tough to understand, especially even outside of the accidental excuse. What the heck could he have been doing with that weapon? Let's continue at MinotDailyNews.com. A 42-year-old Minot man charged with the May 21st shooting death of his wife would at times play with guns in what would be construed as in a reckless manner and had been on his fourth marriage, a prosecutor said in court on Friday. So now it's becoming somewhat clearer. There was something he was doing with the weapon that was completely unnecessary and playing with it. The only thing I could imagine is him joking about shooting someone, not knowing that it was loaded. And I'm using quotes around not knowing because I don't know if he did or he didn't. I mean, how else would you be playing with a gun? Like, especially a rifle, if the rifle information is accurate. Let me just throw that out there. You know, if it's a pistol and he's trying to do some type of gunfighter, winging it around his finger and it goes off or something like that. This is such strange language. I've honestly never seen it in a case like this before. So I'm really having trouble understanding what it could have been, what he did with the gun that was so reckless. But it's very clear that's exactly what they're going for. Rod made an initial appearance in district court before Judge Doug Mattson. And Ward County Assistant State's Attorney Breezy Schmidt told Mattson this was not an accident. And now, probably the most important piece of information that I found in all these articles so far, Schmidt also said a minor child witnessed the shooting. I don't know if that's necessarily one of her children. I'm kind of assuming it likely is. And if it is, that is probably, I don't know if it's the worst aspect of this case. It is a severely heartbreaking aspect of this case. Can you imagine seeing your mother shot by her new husband? I also don't want to gloss over that this is his fourth marriage, but I did want to point that back out because once again, if this is someone that had been having an escalating pattern of violence, I would like to think that there would be previous charges from these other relationships, and we're not seeing that either. So it's still, I don't know. The fact that we now have a child that's reportedly witnessed this has certainly tilted the scale for me. I'm sure it has for you guys as well. Mattson also ordered Rod to have no contact with 9 people who are associated with the alleged victim and not to possess firearms if he is released on bond. And just a day ago, KXNet posted another article about this case. They have scored another interview This one not with Evan. This one with the lawyer representing Eric Rod. Connie Rod died in what was first deemed as an accidental shooting. By August, the story shifted, and her husband, Eric Rod, was arrested for murder. Eric's lawyer questions how a, quote, small group put a lot of external pressure on law enforcement to open a murder investigation. The Minot police chief says it's not that simple, and I'd have to believe it's not as well. And we covered his comments on that previous article. He's not saying that that's what opened the murder investigation. He's saying, at least what I'm getting from it, is it did nudge them. It gave them some more insight. But I would like to think that this was an open death investigation right from the start. I don't feel like it ever got to a point of being closed and then having to be reopened from the social pressure, because the time frame is just too tight. Keep in mind, this had to be run through the state attorney. So the time doesn't seem like it went on long enough. If this was a case where we were talking about 6 years later, all of a sudden they announced that they thought that this was a murder and they made an arrest, then yes, I would think that the social influence maybe pushed a case that had been put in a closed or at least cold status. I don't think we really had that happen here. So it's kind of interesting that the lawyer is hitting it from that angle. Eric Rod's attorney, Patrick Waters, commented, the two had just been married for a short time, but they were building a life together. And so there's a lot that just doesn't make sense about this. I kind of get what he's trying to say here. I just don't know if it applies very well in this particular case. Yes, married for a short time, a year and a couple months, okay. But marriage is for some people, they rush into it. For other people, they take a really long time. There's a long period of courtship before they get into that. I don't know how long they were together before they actually got married. There's a lot in this statement that has just been really boiled down to a real hard oversimplification, and it's not strong enough for a justification, particularly when we're talking about a guy that has had several marriages before. Maybe Eric is just not great in these types of relationship situations. Maybe that's part of the changes that Evan and other friends started noticing. Maybe she was worried about not being happy. I could tell you from looking at her LinkedIn profile, she also was connected to a professional organization for marriage counseling. Knowing her skill set, I would think that even if she wasn't an expert in relationship counseling in particular, she would at least be aware enough of needing help around something like that, that she would seek it for herself. There's a lot of factors at play here that this statement, I don't know. It feels to me like a lawyer that's fishing for an angle, kind of. I mean, if this is your time, you finally are being interviewed, you're trying to put out some information. This is kind of one of the best things that comes out of it. I don't know. I'm not feeling great about this. Back to another quote from him. Despite what the small group of very loud voices may have to say, otherwise this has been a tragic situation for Eric. Quote, the chief of police for Minot made a statement that indicated that it was a group of people from the community that gave information or made statements that led to this being expanded on. That's, I guess the way that that's worded is somewhat fair. It sounds from that article that it kind of fell off of our radar until the community brought it back to our attention. And that's not the case, said John Klug, the police chief. So he's being very clear. That's not what happened. And honestly, from his quote, I've already said it, but basically I didn't get that sense either, that it fell off their radar. This time frame it's too tight. Our case was continuing from day one, Klug continued, and you rely on the people that know the victims the best to share what they think feels right or wrong about the situation, and then we have to prove it, Klug explained. Eric pleaded not guilty. Chief Klug says now it's up to the jury. His attorney says at the time he believes that what happened that night was an accident. He says Eric was handling a new firearm to be packed for a camping trip, and that he didn't realize it was loaded when it went off. Although it couldn't be disclosed, Chief Klug said there is evidence that points to murder. Outside of additional evidence, there's something else about Eric that is just sticking out for me personally. On his Facebook page here, we see that his occupation seems to be, or at least a previous occupation, security forces, K-9 at United States Air Force. Based on some of the pictures that I'm seeing in his Facebook here, and I don't want to go through them because I think there's children in some of them. It does look like he was working as a military police officer, and I think that appears to be fairly recent. I'm seeing some stuff. Oh goodness, there's a picture of what looks like, I believe it's the K-9 that he was working with, that's posted to his profile in 2016. So it's just, once again, making me wonder about his experience with firearms. I mean, if this is a guy, yeah, maybe he had former military experience. He was in the Air Force at one point, you know, when he was younger, 15, 20 years ago. I don't know that it's all that different, but now, considering that it seems like he's got more current firearms experience, likely, and on top of that, studied criminal justice at DMACC, I'm seeing here as well. I don't know, guys. I'm just really not feeling great about this case. Evan actually posted on his Facebook, after that recent article that just came out, a small group with loud voices. That's exactly what we are, and we would never be quiet about it. He did that on purpose, and he should have never been let out on bond, but I trust the investigation, and I know they'll get this right. That's interesting. It sounds like Evan believes that he did actually make bond. Now, I also wanted to do just a quick touch. You guys know I'm always trying to understand the odds or the numbers that equate into something like this. Here at Pew Research, in 2017, the most recent year for which complete data is available, 39,773 people died from gun-related injuries. How many of those were accidental specifically? We can see on this pie graph here, well, 97% are accounted for in these two big categories. There is a 3% slice left, and that slice comes down to 486 that are considered unintentional, which I would think is the closest category that we could get to accidental. That works out to be about 1.2%. So not impossible, but the likelihood extremely low. For murders, 14,500, and that's 37%. So just kind of looking at the numbers, the possibilities here, it would certainly be leaning much stronger towards murder. Also, I found some additional information here at the Injury Epidemiology website. We estimate 430 unintentional firearm fatalities in the U.S. per year, which that seems to line up pretty well with the 2017 information. The rate is highest for older children to young adults, that's ages 10 to 29. So now of that 430 we had, let's start narrowing it down even further. Common circumstances include playing with the gun, thinking the gun was unloaded, and hunting. The victim is suspected to have consumed alcohol in nearly a quarter of the deaths. That's a really important consideration we don't have any information about here in this case as well. And in 46.8% of deaths among those aged 20 to 29. So of that 430, we've got chunks of that just weeding down that probability or the possibility that this is actually an accident. So I did hear back from Evan. We had actually a really good conversation. There's several questions he couldn't answer, which I totally understand because they do relate kind of specifically to the case. But I asked him how specifically he knew Connie. How did they meet? He said, Connie and I met at a wedding of a mutual friend. Then we ended up working together at Job Corps. I asked how long had they been friends. He said they were friends for a little over a year. I then asked, how did you make law enforcement aware of the concerns that you had? I was just kind of like, did they just notice it on Facebook, or did someone from the group reach out? He says, I personally did not approach law enforcement. I kind of vented on social media about getting justice for her. So once again, if we're just trying to look at this as a learning experience, it doesn't take a giant conversation thread. It just takes people having the right conversation, showing that they have knowledge in the right place. And I believe that's actually what made the connection here. I asked if he would attend the trial. He said, I believe most of us will attend the trial. And I believe he's talking about that circle of friends. I also asked, do you have any concerns about being incorrect about Eric? He said, I trust the system, and I don't believe any of us are incorrect with our thoughts and opinions. Finally, I asked anything you would suggest to others who might be in a similar situation. And he said, I've lost 2 friends to domestic violence in Minot. I just want people to intervene whenever possible. There's no reason to wait because time may run out. Very, very smart and good point of view, and something that we should all keep in mind and keep an eye out for our friends and family. Sometimes I run into these cases that just grab my focus, and despite the fact that there's not a lot of strong information that's out there, it raises questions in me that I just want to put to you guys and start a conversation about. And this is one of those. Initially, when I started looking at it, I was really of the mind that, you know, how could we go from this being an accident to being a murder? Like, and because of some of the quotes that I was seeing from KX News, I was kind of feeling the same way that the attorney was talking about. How does, you know, a conversation on Facebook essentially all of a sudden open a murder investigation? As I dived into the details, I came to learn that that's really not what actually happened there. And as I got more and more into the details, I see that the needle is certainly moving in the direction of this being a murder, and moving there in a pretty strong way. I'm still a little caught up on no prior criminal history being attached to this, but the logic of just, this is a person that should be familiar with weapons, having an accident of this nature, the notes that we're seeing in the legal documentation about him being reckless in some way with the gun. And then, of course, the possibility that there is a witness, not possibility. I mean, we basically have them saying there is a minor child that witnessed this. Do they have the right man in this case? I believe so. Even with the little pieces that we got looking into today's case, I think so. Like, I almost, when I was looking into this, I'm like, should I do this as a case cracked? But we've got to be fair to this. This is still a man that is innocent until proven guilty at this point. But there's a lot of questions around this case I want to talk to you guys about. So let's do that in the comments down below. On behalf of myself and my amazing supporters, we are making a donation to the Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch in memory of Connie Rod. Thank you guys so much for helping me do that. And I'll have a link in the description box below if you would like to do the same. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several new supporters on Patreon. Thank you, Elizabeth Harris, Jenna Shaw, and Claire Dalton. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep us here looking into these cases together, trying to understand these tough situations together, making donations to help causes like we are today. I can't do that without your help. So thank you guys so much for the support. Take care. Have a good and safe weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.